Hey. Hope you're having fun in class. Hopefully, we got about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes left of class or 15 minutes left of class. Um, Another day where you just have to sit back and watch. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about your essay, 5 paragraph essay. Don't freak out too much about it because it is going to be about you, but we haven't done any writing in the form of an essay yet. Now, if you look back over the Google Docs that Google Forms you've been handing in, like there's multiple essays worth of writing there because there have been so many paragraphs that I've asked you to complete. But we haven't put in like 5 paragraphs in a row with transitions and stuff like that. So we'll do a little bit more writing in the second half of the year. And that first essay, I've got my notes down about what I think you could do for your 5 paragraph essay. Don't worry, I will walk you through it. We're going to talk about what paragraph 2 should look like. I will write the essay beforehand so you'll have something to look at. But for the last day, this will be the third day that we talk about these multiple intelligences, you'll actually hear from the guy. His name is Howard Gardner. I might have the first name wrong. What's his name? But definitely Gardner is the last name. And this is the video I'm going to mostly play, but there will be a time where I stop, a couple times where I stop and I want to fill you in a little bit more on what he's saying. So you can see the title of this, There Isn't One Intelligence, There Are 8, and here they are. Now, we've been talking about 9. Yeah, on the board there are 9, and he's actually going to talk about a 10th one, the teaching one, which if you want to use for your essay, you can, if you're like a good teacher. But since I'm not asking you to memorize these, I'm not asking you to read about these, I would like for you to hear one more time about the 9 intelligences. You've heard once from that lady, you've heard me talk about it. Now you're going to hear the actual guy, Howard. It's Howard, I think, Howard Gardner. So let me start this thing. I'll make myself a lot smaller. All right, here we go.
Currently, I think there are 8 intelligences that I'm very confident about, and a few more that I've been thinking about.
So this guy's from Harvard. I mean, he's got to be right, right? And I'm not sure why he always has his eyes closed, but you'll probably notice he doesn't open his eyes a lot. I thought that they might be closed at times. I'm not sure, but here we go.
Share that with our audience. Um, the first 2 intelligences are the ones which IQ tests and other kind of standardized tests valorize. And as long as we know there are only 2 out of 8, it's perfectly fine to look at them. Linguistic intelligence is how well you're able to use language. It's a kind of skill that poets have, other kinds of writers. Journalists tend to have linguistic intelligence. Orators. The second intelligence is logical mathematical intelligence. As the name implies, logicians, mathematicians, scientists have that kind of intelligence. They're able to do mathematical proofs. They're able to do scientific reasoning and experimentation. And it's great to have language and logical intelligence because most tests really focus on that. And if you do well in those tests, as long as you stay in school, you think you're smart. But if you ever walk out onto Broadway or a highway or into the woods or into a farm, you then find out that other intelligences are at least as important.
All right, so I just want to point out what he said there. And that is if you stay in school, those 2 intelligences, the linguistic, think of like language arts class, they both start with L, the linguistics, and then the mathematical, it also has like logical mathematical, but think of like Miss Began's class, math class. So if you're good in those 2 intelligences, you probably do pretty well in school. But those aren't the only 2 important ones. So keep that in mind as we go through some of these other ones, because if you're not in your essay, I'm going to ask you like which ones are you not good at? And if you list either of those 2 or both of those 2, you probably go through school thinking like you're pretty dumb. So be careful. That's not the only those aren't the only two intelligences we have to worry about. Then they're not even in school, they're more important than the others. But in life, they're pretty much equal to the other, however many you want to count, the other 8 or so. All right, let's bring this guy back up and we will keep playing.
So if third intelligence is musical intelligence, and that's the capacity to appreciate different kinds of musics, to produce the music by voice or by an instrument, or to conduct music. And people say, well, music's a talent, it's not an intelligence. And I say, well, why, if you're good with words, is that an intelligence? But if you're good with tones and rhythms and timbres, and nobody's ever given me a good answer, which is why it makes sense to talk about musical intelligence. And in certain cultures over history, musical intelligence has been very important. A fourth intelligence is spatial intelligence. That's the intelligence which allows us to handle and work in space that's close by. A chess player would have spatial intelligence, a surgeon would have spatial intelligence. But there's another variety of spatial intelligence which we use for much broader navigation. That's what an airplane pilot or a sea captain would have. How do you find your way around large territory and large space? Similarly, with the fifth intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, it comes in 2 flavors. One flavor is the ability to use your whole body to solve problems or to make things. And athletes and dancers would have that kind of bodily kinesthetic intelligence. But another variety is being able to use your hands or other parts of your body to solve problems or make things. A craft person would have bodily kinesthetic intelligence, even if they weren't a particularly good athlete or dancer. Sixth intelligence and seventh intelligence have to do with human beings. Interpersonal intelligence is how you understand other people.
Great. It looks like the video was interrupted by Miss Abbott needing to go to the office. And I think some of you have had Miss Abbott in the past. So shout out to Miss Abbott. So did you notice those other 2? We've talked about them. The bodily kinesthetic, not easy to say. Think about PE class. And then spatial. He mentioned like a chess player or a surgeon. So somebody that knows the area around them really well. And I've mentioned in the videos, like I'm pretty bad at this when it comes to directions, things like that. So in my essay, you will see spatial. That's where I have like a big deficiency. I'm not very good at that one. All right, hopefully there'll be no more interruptions, but who knows? It's all, I'm recording this all live and it's during our teacher workshop. So we'll see. All right, let's do it.
How you motivate them, how you lead them, how you work with them, how you cooperate with them. Anybody in any workplace with other people needs interpersonal intelligence. Leaders hopefully have a lot of interpersonal intelligence, but any intelligence can be used in a pernicious way. So the salesman that sells you something you don't want for a price you don't want to pay, he or she has got interpersonal intelligence. It's just not being used in a way that we might prefer. The seventh kind of intelligence is difficult to assess, but it's very important. It's intrapersonal intelligence. It's understanding yourself. If we go back way in history and prehistory, knowledge of yourself probably wasn't that important because people did what their parents and grandparents did, whether they were hunters or fishermen or craftspeople. But nowadays, especially in a developed society, people lead their own lives. We follow our own careers. We often switch careers. We don't necessarily live at home as we get older. And if you don't have a good understanding of yourself, you are in big trouble. So that's intrapersonal intelligence. The eighth intelligence, which I added some years ago, is the naturalist intelligence. And that's the capacity to make important, relevant discriminations in the world of nature between one plant and another, between one animal and another. It's the intelligence of the naturalist, the intelligence of Charles Darwin. I missed it the first go around when I wrote about it. I tried to atone by adding it to my list. And by the way, you might say, well, nature isn't so important anymore. In fact, everything we do in the commercial world uses our naturalist intelligence. Why do I buy this jacket rather than another one, this sweater rather than another one, his one hairstyle rather than another? Those all make use of the naturalist intelligence because the brain's very adaptive. And when an old use of a brain center no longer is relevant, it gets hijacked for something new. So we're all using our naturalist intelligence, even if we never walk out into the woods or into the savannah of East Asia. There are two other intelligences which I'm interested in. One of them is called the teaching or pedagogical intelligence, the intelligence which allows us to be able to teach successfully to other people. Now, you could have two people who have exactly the same expertise and knowledge in a field, but one is a very good teacher and the other isn't. That probably doesn't surprise individuals so much, but what got me fascinated was as young as 2 or 3, kids already know how to teach. Now, what does that mean? You show a child how to do something, let's say a 3 or 4-year-old, and then you ask the child to explain it to an older person or to a younger person. And even the 3 or 4-year-old will explain it very differently to a young person, will go through details and point things and speak slowly. And with an older person, they'll be much more elliptical and say, well, you do this and that, and then you can figure it out. So that shows as young as 3, let's say, we already have a teaching intelligence. The other one,
I just want to talk about that teaching intelligence for a second. I'm just going to take like a drummer. So they would have a really good drummer. Let's say a really like, just name a drummer anywhere, the best one. Okay. So they might have that high musical intelligence. They know how to play the drums. They're one of the best in the world. But they might not be able to teach that craft to someone else. So it's I think it's rare to find that where someone is like super good at something and being able to teach it to someone else. And you may find this when you get to college that some of your teachers, like, they aren't that great. They might be really good at what field they're in, science or history, but that just doesn't translate well for them to teach. And I think the teaching and the interpersonal, like knowing other people, like how they react, I think they can overlap a little bit. He's not saying this, just that's what makes sense to me is like understanding other people. It would be helpful to know to have that intelligence if you are a teacher, like how other people react to what you do and stuff like that. All right, almost done here. Continue.
one is one which I think is going to be difficult to prove to a skeptic, but I call it existential intelligence. And the existential intelligence is the intelligence of big questions, philosophical questions, artistic questions. What does it mean to love? Why do we die? What's going to be in the future? My pet bird might have more musical intelligence. The rats scurrying around the floor might have more spatial intelligence, but no other animals have existential intelligence. Part of the human condition is to think about questions of existence. And I like to say every 5-year-old has existential intelligence because 5-year-olds are always asking why this, why that. But the difference between a 5-year-old and a philosopher is the 5-year-old doesn't pay too much attention to the answer, whereas philosophers and other people who develop existential intelligence are really very interested in how we attack questions like that. So again, whether there's 8 intelligences or 10 or 12 is less important to me than having broken the monopoly of a single intelligence, which sort of labels you for all time. I think if we lived forever, we could probably develop each intelligence to a very high degree. But life's very short. And if you devote too much attention to one intelligence, you're not going to have much time to work on other kinds of intelligences. And so the big question is, should you play to strength or should you bolster weakness? And that's a value judgment.
So what he means by that, play to strength, like if you're good at something already, like keep getting better and better at it, or should you focus on something that you're not so good at and try to make it better? That's what I guess he's saying. Like if a parent came to him for their child, or like you can be thinking about those for yourself.
Judgment. A scientist cannot give you an answer to that. If, for example, you want to be a jack of all trades and be very well rounded, then probably you're going to want to nurture the intelligences which aren't that strong. If, on the other hand, you're dead set on really coming to the top of some particular heap, then you're probably going to find the intelligences that you're strongest at and really push those. And if a parent came to me and said, well, should we supplement or should we accentuate? I would say, well, tell me what you'd like your child to do, or better, let the child tell you what he or she wants to do, rather than saying, well, science says you should do one or the other. I think it's a question of values, not of science.
All right. So hopefully that was all right. Let me pull myself up. Hopefully that was all right. I mean, he's a Harvard professor, so he is going to use some big words, but I thought it would be helpful for you to hear some of that. Hopefully you understood most of it. You heard another person talk about those intelligences. So hopefully now you're somewhat an expert, and then you're such an expert that you could write about some of these intelligences. How about that? All right.